Hey everyone, welcome to episode 245 of 15 with Andy, Randy, and Jeff. All three of us are here, and it seems odd that just a week ago today, it was Groundhog Day, and I believe Punxsutawney Phil said we were going to have 6 more weeks of winter, but apparently that doesn't apply to Florida, as today I'm riding with the windows down in my 1994 F-150 with no AC, thinking to myself, it would have been a good day to have the Harley working because, man, is it hot. And, isn't it February? Where was this 6 weeks of winter that were supposed to be continuing on for us when it feels a lot more like April or May here in Florida? And
it was 80-something degrees today.
Yeah. It was way, way, way too warm for me. But anyway, I hope you're enjoying the sunshine if you are here. And, I have to feel bad. I have relatives in from out of town, and they live in Green Bay, Wisconsin. And the temperature there, I believe it was yesterday morning, was -7. And the high for the day was 1. So, it's all relative. We should be thankful for what we have.
Yeah, quit complaining about hot weather.
So they're here enjoying the week. They picked a good week to do it. So anyway, this week we jumped back into, or this was our first, we finished our last sermon series, Stewarding the Gospel, and we started with Jesus Doesn't Make It Easy. And the title of the message was Acceptable Murder. And I really had no idea where we were headed necessarily with the message, given that title. But I assumed we weren't talking about the physical act of murder. It didn't take long to confirm. I believe it was 87 verses in the Bible, if Andy's correct on his math, before Cain kills Abel. And that by the time we get to Sinai, which isn't that long, it's number 6 on the Big Ten list, known as the commandments, the things you're not supposed to do, the things you're supposed to do. And as brutal as the physical act is to think about, that we're physical murder, the real murder that the world, and goodness, I wish I could say it wasn't, but we as Christians have allowed, and at times seemingly even embraced, to become this acceptable murder. Early on in the message, Andy mentioned that Jesus moved the bar in our verse for the message, Matthew chapter 5, 21 through 26, and he had this to say: there can be no full satisfaction from meeting the low bar of action in either doing or not doing the overt behavior. Oh, man. So we're aiming low, and if we aim low and we achieve hitting the bar, that's not enough? I mean, what are we talking about? Not by long.
A lot of satisfaction. Yeah. How you doing in your Christian walk? I'm doing great. I hadn't murdered anybody.
As comical as that is, it almost lends itself to how flippant at times we can become to this, because it's not one of those always overt sins, because we don't even always know it's happened. We don't know somebody has, maybe they're angry at us and they contempt, and you broke that one down, and then killing the person's reputation. I mean, a lot of this starts, or maybe most of it happens, in gossip. What do you think?
Yeah, a little bit of anger with a fast-moving tongue, you can do a lot of damage.
Ooh. Yeah, for sure. And I love you said Seneca called anger a brief insanity. And maybe no truer statement ever, because if anytime you can just right now think back to someone who said something, they did something, some situation that you've had with somebody, and when you first find out, or you've had, and for me, it's usually when I first find out, I get really angry really fast. And then it's almost later where you kind of let that boil a little bit and you've had a chance to think about it. And for a minute, you're like, well, yeah, maybe I can see that. And then the rest of you is like, heck, no. And then it's even worse, because now you've built up even more things that you can be angry about. And then you can remember something that maybe they did even before that. And then we can just find so many ways to build ourselves up. I was fascinated with how deep we took something that seems, again, pretty simple on the top. But you really start breaking that down. And these are all things: anger, contempt, and then just killing someone with gossip, just their reputation. And these three it's hard to pull them all apart. How do we attack if one of these is like, well, maybe anger's my thing, and I don't really maybe see myself so much better than anyone else, maybe just an occasional thing, and I'm not a gossip. How do we attack this or do we have to think of this as a whole idea to really come at this? Because are we really saying that we're not doing any of these? Honestly, I'm probably not.
Well, I think you have to realize too that anger is, I hate to say it this way because all of us are prone to act out our anger, but anger is actually just an emotion like anything else. Mm-hmm. And so we have to realize that in this context of anger and then trying to destroy, we do that in both. We try to destroy somebody else and we try to destroy ourselves too. It can destroy us too.
Good point. So
I really don't think that the emotion itself is the problem. It's us, like Andy mentioned, it's this insanity that all of a sudden we don't want to bring it through a thought process where we start to, figure out how we could actually look at it in a different way or use it to be constructive or even find conviction in it,
Yeah.
But other than acting out or acting in, anger can just be brought through a thought process where all of a sudden I can actually be constructive with this emotion rather than just trying to destroy somebody or myself even.
Yeah, the Bible tells us to be angry and sin not. So anger is not evil. It's how we manage it, what we do with it, and where it's directed. And the wording here in the original language just seems to indicate that we're talking about selfish anger. Anger that is angry because I'm not getting what I think I should have, or what I deserve, or what I want.
Yeah.
And it's not even that burst of anger, Randy, that you get the news and you flare up really fast, and then it's sort of over. The word here is really that smoldering anger that you nurture and try to keep alive versus letting it go. So when we hold on to anger, we're only damaging ourselves. It begins to eat us up, and then it can flare back up and do all kinds of damage at any moment. And so I think it's really this is smoldering selfish anger. Anger over I didn't get my way, or anger over I was done wrong, anger over
anger that turns into revenge or spite or some kind of vindictiveness. So sure.
Is there a way then you mentioned the flare up is not the same as this, and maybe for some, that the flare up and then, maybe you have another flare up and you just kind of can't seem to let it go. And then it becomes this smoldering. Is there a way, or is there tools out there that we can maybe learn how to just deal with that flare up anger and not let it become the other? Because I feel like a lot of times when we don't just deal with it, or we're not sure, whatever the situation is, how somebody has hurt us, or whether it was just gossip or it was something else, something worse than that. But it seems as though once that starts and you don't know what to do to stop it, to slow it down, you've tried to forgive, you've tried to pray about it, you've even maybe tried to talk to that person, it only made it worse, or it didn't resolve it at all. How do we get to a point where we somehow contain or we move on before it gets so bad? Because I know there's been times in my life where the flare-up has turned into something long-standing, and then at the end, I didn't want to fix it because honestly, it was an embarrassment. I'm like, I can't believe I went that far on something so ridiculous that seemed so huge at the flare-up. And now it's so dumb. I can't go talk to this person now. I was an idiot.
Well, Jesus in the passage, he goes on. I didn't give it as much airtime in the sermon. I just covered in about a paragraph near the end. But he's saying, hey, if you're at church and you're sitting there and all of a sudden you remember somebody's got something against you, get up and leave church, leave worship. Abandon your worship of God to go be reconciled to your brother or your sister.
I like that. Yeah.
If you're dropping your offering in the offering basket, and you remember somebody's got something against you, stop even giving your gift until you go get this thing reconciled. And again, like you say, Randy, it's possible to go to go actually and talk to the person with the best of intentions of reconciliation. There probably needs to be a journey toward humility before that journey to the person of reconciliation takes place.
Yeah, I think the context of getting out of church and going, that's, we have to realize that's not me going to go figure out how I can take care of the guy that's wronged me. No. It's actually the other way around.
Oh man, I had a little hope here.
Yeah.
No, when I remember that somebody has something against me, not me against them.
Oh, yeah,
exactly.
Yeah. Mm.
And the point obviously is that I can own it. I mean, I think the worst thing we can do on both sides, whether it's acting in or acting out, I think the worst thing we can do is try to push it under the rug and believe that it's not there or avoid what it really is. And that's why I think that's so important that we actually do get up and make that assertive choice to realize that, hey, this is going to eat me alive if I keep this inside.
Or it may not be eating me up at all. I may be over it. It's like, but I realize
you have to
now recognize that somebody else is still being very much bothered by this thing, and they're not back into oneness with me. The onus God puts on his followers to go make this try to get this thing reconciled.
Oh,
right.
I like that.
But the problem is if I don't recognize it as I'm part of it as well, I come across as being a little holier than thou,
a little arrogant.
Yeah.
No, I like that part that doesn't let us off the hook, like you said, even if it's something that is you've moved on from and you've figured out how to not leave it long and stew, but that someone else, because often we do know what that other person's going through, and even if you've gotten past it, sometimes it can feel good. I mean, and it's bad to say, but
let them stew.
That's right. Like, well,
I'm glad they're feeling that way about it.
Boiling your own juices, bud.
If they can't get over it, that's not my problem. And and then to be not only the person who you've kind of figured it out for yourself, and maybe there's been a little bit of reconciliation there between the two parties, but then to extend the olive branch and basically put yourself out there and say, I care that you are still upset. And like you said, this listening, long listening, not talking, holding your tongue, being a good listener. And man, it's a good recipe that we don't often use, particularly in today's society, of showing people how much we care and how much we love them. And even if that's rough to do, man, think of the consequences. Think of how different, like how countercultural that is in the society that we live in, even within the church, because, there's no perfection there either. And that makes a whole different way to look at it. And when you talked about the contempt part of this, you mentioned pride of birth, I'm just better than you because of my lineage, or how much money and material possessions I might have, or where, what position I might hold in society, and then knowledge. I'm just smarter than you. I know more. I'm educated, all those things. But you said, how dare we look with contempt on one from whom Jesus sacrificed to reconcile, just like the rest of us, just like we were reconciled. And I thought that was pretty powerful to just remember when, maybe we're in that place. And even for us, if we can, I think we have to recognize that in ourselves first. And then we can go, oh yeah, that was for me, and I need to extend that to them. I thought that was just, something we know, but just in that context, I thought that was pretty powerful. One of my favorite parts of the message.
Good. Yeah, that was good.
Just the simple reminders sometimes are the best. And then we began talking then about killing a person's reputation, and the William Barclay quote. I don't know. We've been on a roll with quotes lately. I think it was last week or the week before. We had 3 of them in the show notes. But this was William Barclay on his commentary on this text that we read in Matthew 5:21-26. No punishment is too severe for the malicious talebearer or the gossip over the teacups which murders people's reputations. Such conduct, in the most literal sense, is a hell-deserving sin. Ouch! Woo! Wowzers! That's really calling it out.
Well, it is, and if it was that hell deserving of a sin in Barclay's day, when it was just over teacups and it was just a malicious story that someone told someone around a campfire or over a drink,
that could never go viral. Yeah.
Today, it is even more contemptuous and worthy of the fires of hell, because we can hide behind social media and of some kind and throw daggers and not have to worry about anybody hitting back because they can't reach you.
Yeah,
it's just today what can happen to. I mean, in preparing the sermon, I did some research on stories of reputations that got ruined, and it's just incredible what a vindictive person can do to a person's whole life in a matter of literally hours.
Yeah.
Well, and I found you had a quote later on that as you were talking about this, and it was actually right before the Barclay quote. And you said, I find it fascinating that Jesus says that the one who destroys his brother's name and reputation is liable to the severest judgment of all, the fires of Gehenna. Is that correct?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And you said this valley of Hinnom was to the southwest of Jerusalem and was the kind of public incinerator, always smoldering. It was the place where useless and evil things were destroyed. And I thought that's about as good a description of where things like this should go. And just that Jesus seems to be insisting that the worst thing of all is to destroy another person's reputation or take away their good name. And yet, maybe there's been has there been a better message for the last year? I mean, people have had more time.
It's a 2020 message.
Have we ever had more time as a society or as a globe to be keyboard warriors and to just, fight about every little detail and call people names that don't agree with us, or a litany of other ideas like this. And yet, as Barclay points out, I mean, this was prevalent in their times. Just the methodology of how we do it has probably changed and still stayed the same. I'm sure there's still people that meet over the backyard fence or over the cup of tea and perpetuate the same evils of this.
It's just easier today, I think, than it's ever been. And so I think it behooves us, what a great word. It's in our best interest to because of that, to go with James's counsel about, being quick to listen and slow to speak and slow to become angry.
Oh, yeah. Somewhere, I didn't write it down, but, here it is. Really, how many of your instantaneous thoughts need no refinement for being shared? That was one of my favorite lines in the whole message. I had to go back to notes here while we were on here because I thought I was going to put that in my notes and I forgot. And I just thought that was like, stop and think about it, really. And you had it capitalized in your sermon notes, which I thought was brilliant. How many of your instantaneous thoughts need no refinement? Oh, man.
Yeah, I mean, I think about I write a lot of letters and I'll write recommendations for people, and I think about my first draft and then my final draft, and they're oftentimes worlds apart.
Yeah,
with reordering words and sentences, and it's not even really a thought; it's just a letter, and I think, oh my lands. You see people constantly tweeting and texting and taking pictures of their meal and showing it to everybody in the world that what they're eating right now. It's like, who cares? I mean,
I think we can go a step further and say, if that's true, then probably none of your reactions.
Right. Well said, Jeff.
So our instantaneous reactions just, don't bother.
Instantaneous reactions are as bad as the instantaneous thought.
Sometimes they're worse.
They're worse. So, they're worse. So they all need so there's no margin of error on the reaction part.
No,
they all need help and refinement. Yeah.
Well, you think about if we I mean, I've got I don't know how many emails that I've written mainly for my own benefit and then thrown away. If we would really seriously think about the effects of what we're saying and how we're saying it and the tone of voice that's coming across and what we're writing. And we did that on the front end. it might change the reactions as well on the other end. It's just we just have to be more thoughtful and grace filled.
Well, a question that came up as we've been talking, I hadn't thought about this earlier, but so much of this, I think, again, is just rooted in probably in our need to think more of ourselves than we ought, number one, because I think that's where a ton of gossip comes in. And sometimes it's the easiest thing to do without even realizing that you're doing it because someone asked you an honest question that you have an answer for. And maybe the basics of the story are okay to share. They've been given permission to share. But that the questions on the other side are always going to be trying to dig out more, specifically if someone is trying to do this to gain information to then go and share again and again and again. And I don't know why it seems so difficult. And I'm asking this a legitimate question just to get your thoughts, because oftentimes I'll be around someone who will really relish in the gossip. Like, we're going to set the whole story up. Like, we can't just tell the gossip. We have to give the backstory. We have to give the gossip, all of it, and then some. And then we have to give where this is going and, what they did wrong. And sometimes it's hard to just say, I don't want to hear this. Or, and it's not always a place where you can just get up and leave because it's in a group and it's, it can be awkward. What's the best way, or what have you, maybe just personally yourselves, I don't know if there's a best way, but just personally, when you run into someone that is gossiping and you're just like, you don't want to create a scene, but you also don't want to allow it. You don't need it for yourself. I'd personally rather not know any gossip because it doesn't do anything for me. I've never liked it, and I just would rather not know and just be the person who's like, "Oh, didn't you hear about?" I'm like, nope, I sure didn't, and I don't want to know. But you guys must be exposed to this as much or more than anybody as pastors. Yeah. How do you stop somebody in the nicest way possible that you've ever experienced?
Well, Jeff has a whole counseling degree. And he just yells at them, "Stop it!"
Jeff, do you use the ruler? Do you smack him on the?
Well, it's interesting. Everybody's different too on these kind of things. I usually, because everybody's exposed. One of the hardest things about churches is for some reason people think that it's okay to gossip because we're actually, we're caring,
right under the guise.
We're sharing, prayer requests.
Yes, the prayer requests. Yes,
you have to have the whole story in order to pray.
And so I literally have used that. I've said, "Is that prayer request confidential?"
Oh man.
And I've actually used that line. Because it is important.
I think, Jeff, sometimes people aren't doing it with conscious intent. It's and interrupting and just saying, is that prayer request confidential? All of a sudden, just wakes them up to the fact, maybe I shouldn't be sharing everything I hear. Kind of thing.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. Just because I think so many times, I think we could avert a ton of disaster, because I know that sometimes even if you're not in the conversation directly, you can be a bystander and you'll hear a piece of information and you don't have context for it. And it can seem very innocuous to you as a listener or as a secondary hearer of that information. And someone says, "Oh, do you know?" "Oh, I don't know. I heard this," but it doesn't seem like, like what could that possibly have to do with the greater picture of anything? And it just seems like if we could maybe just stop and just, I don't know, like we need a secret code word, or we need, something that we could all just agree, like at least church folk, come on. Like, no, we're not going to do this. Seems like so much hurt could just be averted if we could figure out how to be better in this particular thing. But it seems so difficult at the same time. But anyway, we could probably talk about that forever and not come to one. So I would love to hear and I have a different takeaway that we're going to use today, but if you have something you use to, slow down, stop, turn around, move somebody backwards on sharing information you don't really want to know, then please do send that in, 407-965-1607 or podcast@wholelife.church. And this week, one of our Whole Life takeaways asked, when you were 10, what did you want to do when you grow up? How did that work out? Any vestiges of that original dream? And I thought about that one. And the reason I chose it was, and that's why I just asked you for the other, because I do want you to, if you do have some ideas of how we can be better at stopping the gossipers in their track, that would be absolutely wonderful. This one was just more fun because when you were 10, and I thought back when I was 10, and since I can remember, I always wanted to be a DJ, spinning records at Wolfman Jack, all these different things, kind of dating myself here with actually records. For those of you who may not know, a record is this big vinyl platter that there's music on. They put it on a thing called a record player. But anyway, long story short, I was hired on a Wednesday at a radio station with the start date of the following Monday, but never worked a day at the station. Outgoing DJ decided to stay in small town Wisconsin instead of heading to Chicago and got his old job, my new job, his old job back. And that was that. So are there any things or any parts of that dream available or still around? So I've been hosting, producing, consulting on podcasts for about 7 years. So there are a few pieces of that old dream that are still alive and well. But I'm really curious. And this is something that I know, guys, we get kind of a bad rep sometimes because the wives are always like, all you want to do is talk about work. And like so much of you is attached to your jobs and, what you do. And that's true. That's a valid argument. But one of the funnest things that I like to do when I meet new people is find out what have you done in the past as a career, like the craziest thing that you've ever done, or your worst job or your best job, or what did you want to be in, you're like a total 180 degrees and gone the opposite direction. So if you'd love to share those with us, I would love to hear them. 407-965-1607, podcast@wholelife.church. And we could embarrass you next week. Come on, join the fun. Our final thoughts on this week's message are from the actual closing to Andy's message. He said, to live to Christ's new standard, there's only one chance for it to be reality. Christ in you, the hope of glory. It is Christ in me that will enable my listening. It is Christ in me that will hold my tongue longer than I'd like. Oh, isn't that the truth? Hold back that post, not send that tweet, erase that text. It is Christ in me that will speak peace to the storm of my anger. And Christ in me can bring the reconciliation with my fellow human that will prevent murder at any level. That would be so awesome. So awesome. So awesome. All right. So in case you thought that this was like hitting a little close to home with some of these, things in our personal life, next week we're continuing. Jesus still isn't making it easy next week. And from what I've
heard that it was said.
No. You have heard that it was said. Yeah. Easy adultery will be our second installment to remind ourselves that Jesus doesn't make it easy. Ooh, Andy. Yeah.
Great. And we're back with with musicians and people on the platform as part of our worship service, still sitting with social distancing and our masks, but we'll have, I won't be the only thing live. If you come to church at 9:30 or noon.
That's right.
You'll have people to interact with.
That's this week. That's the 13th, correct?
The 13th. You better believe it.
All right,
yep.
Man. Now, for those of us who've been there, like Andy has been pretty much every week, and Jeff on the weeks he's had to preach or help out, he's been there too. It's been a long run of people at, Wednesday's always been the big day at church. Yeah. And so there's a ton of us, and I hope you're one of those people that are looking forward to being back together and for singing and being together. Social distancing and masks, it's still not quite the same. But boy, it's a big step forward, and I can't wait personally. So hope you'll join us in church. It is this Sabbath, February the 13th. And of course, next Tuesday evening, it'll be Speaking of Grace, the podcast that contains our message each week. And hey, Wednesday, we'll be back for episode 246, and we're going to talk about easy adultery. So,
don't forget your sweetheart, because Sunday's Valentine's.
Oh, that's right. Sunday's
Valentine's.
So just an FYI, hashtag Valentine's Day, hashtag Amazon, hashtag don't forget. or you'll be in the hashtag the doghouse. So that's going to do it for this week. Thanks for listening, guys. We'll see you all next week and hope to see you at church this week.